Hey everybody, welcome back to Yossi Schmidt Show. Big changes coming, or maybe small, but you'll get to hear Yossi's raw, unfiltered opinions on things that matter to you most. All right, everyone, today we have the great Cash Loren on the show. Cash, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, thank you for having me on your show. My name is Cash Loren, and I host Cash Loren Show. I just talk national politics Monday through Friday on covering the mainstream media in the federal government.
So, speaking about the federal government, we right now have what's a real judicial coup where judges are overthrowing government judges are overthrowing Trump, trying to overthrow Trump's executive orders and everything else. Do you have do you think that the judges can be reined in any way?
Well, yes, they can, and they're already being reined in some ways. And I think Trump is doing something very smart right now that not enough people are talking about. Where the one of the things that he is doing is he is getting all the balls moving very early in his presidency. As there was a problem if you go back to like 2016 presidency to 2020, is he essentially ran out of time. And then when Biden came in, Biden just ended all his executive orders and ended any progress to the DOJ, FBI to go and pursue any of the corruption that was happening in the federal government. It just came roaring right back. And then the rest we know is history. This time, Trump is moving much, much faster. He is moving so fast that I don't think the fake rage machine can keep up with everything that he is doing. And this is one of the parts here now, too. Is remember, we're just past his 100-day mark now. We're not even 6 months into his presidency yet and he has all these balls moving. And as he exposes these judges, he has in some ways been lightly ignoring what they're telling him to do. There was a video, for example, last night where a judge tried to stop arrest of illegal immigrants. Can you imagine this? They broke the law, so they get arrested. But a judge then tried to stop it with an order. And these lawyers, this was down in California, these lawyers were then trying to argue that ICE couldn't arrest illegal immigrants because they had a notice from a judge saying that ICE is not allowed to arrest criminals. I mean, who the heck do these judges think they are? Yet, as I'm sure we'll get in deeper about the separation of powers, this is another instance where the ICE correctly just ignored the judge and ignored the lawyers and threatened them and said, if you don't back off, we'll arrest you too. And they think they got just over 20 illegal immigrants arrested in a single day. And so Trump is quietly, I'd say now, ignoring these illegal orders. But at the end of the day, either SCOTUS is going to step up and do their dang job, or Trump has other options I'm sure we can talk about.
So there is the separation of powers that we need to talk about: the judicial branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch. Let's let's go deeper into that. How would you
Okay.
explain that?
Well, in our Constitution, there's the way that there actually is the separation of powers, which means that each branch of government has power that is only available to them. But then there's also check and balances, which we can get into, but that's very key to understand right from the get go. For example, Congress has the exclusive right to write laws. The president can't write laws, and judges are allegedly not supposed to be able to write laws. But there is also checks and balances. So Congress writes the laws, the president then signs the law into law, or they veto it, and then it goes back to Congress, and Congress has to get, I think it's 2/3 majority to ignore the veto. So that would be Congress' exclusive separation of power versus executive branch or judicial branch. Now let's go over to the judicial branch. The judicial branch has exclusive power to rule on these laws, and they're supposed to be on individual cases. One great example is we're going to be covering into with Donald Trump, for example, because this is how you can end every single left's argument against what they're calling a constitutional crisis. But the judges have zero authority over Trump's executive authority under Article 2 of the Constitution. Meaning, for example, if Donald Trump is like the commander in chief of the government, the army, or the military, and he orders troops to move overseas, can a judge then override that right with an injunction? Well, the answer is no, just in case anyone's confused by fake news. So this is the exact same thing with the judges. They have authority, but they don't have ultimate authority over all three branches. And then you have the executive branch, which we just briefly covered about. This is the person that is in charge of the entire executive of the federal government. As we're seeing a lot through Trump now, what we're talking about for these deportations, where he has exclusive right as the commander in chief to order the federal government to do his will, what we voted for under the Constitution of the United States. Now, these judges, they have no authority of that whatsoever. And remarkably, something that people misunderstand too is SCOTUS does not as well. Okay, SCOTUS only has authority under the Constitution of the United States, basically to interpret it. But SCOTUS cannot write the Constitution of the United States. You see the difference is that these judges, they're trying to write law from the bench, and they're trying to give themselves authority that they've never had from the bench. And that is where they're crossing the line. So when the left talks about like a constitutional crisis or a threat to democracy or any of that stuff, none of that is happening. They are the constitutional threat. They are the crisis, not Donald Trump. So I ask you, how many people voted for these judges? The answer is 0. Now, how many of you voted for Donald Trump? Close to 80 million of you voted for Donald Trump, and he was very transparent about what he was going to do. I think Donald Trump might be the most transparent president we've had in an entire generation, as he's probably the only one that's done everything that he said he was going to do and he campaigned on. So now we go into these judges who are trying to say the most ridiculous rulings whatsoever. Like he can't deport illegal immigrants. Great. If you come to this country illegally, deportation is the due process for coming into our country. Or they're trying to say that he can't arrest criminals who come across this country illegally. I mean, where the heck do these judges think they gain this power from? I like one person to show me on the left, what laws is this? See, this is the issue we have with the left right now, and their activists cosplaying as judges. They think there's no limit on their power, and they're trying to create a situation I'm sure we'll get into where there's no win for Donald Trump. Either he has to submit to these activist judges, or that they're going to try to, of course, push for impeachments.
And Trump has to rein in these judges.
Yeah, and there's several ways that he can do that. The best way to do it, the ultimate way, the way that would be best, I think, for the country, the quickest and easiest, if SCOTUS gets off their butt and stops this. Because SCOTUS could do that today. So let's say this was opposite, all right? Let's say Barack Obama was president and he gave an executive order. And then you had these activists on the conservative side. They were judge shopping. To go that real quick, when you're judge shopping, what they try to do is they'll try to put lawsuits into districts where they think they have a very good favor of getting a judge that they like. All right, so that's essentially what judge shopping is, because you go to a national injunction, right? But let's say like the left, they'll go to like New York or California because there's a lot of liberal judges there. So that would be like going to filing suits, let's say in like Kansas, or filing suits in Florida, right? And trying to get judges that are very conservative to write these injunctions. That's judge shopping. And then once they go in, they judge shop these judges and they get these injunctions. Then they try to say, well, you can't do anything until these injunctions resolve. And then they just drag their feet indefinitely, right? Because it's got to go to that judge, and the judge then has to see it. And then you got to go through the appeal process. And this could take absolute years. And the insane idea that they're going to somehow have, I don't know, 10 million trials for every single illegal immigrant. We all know what this is. This is the left trying to stop the rightful duty of the president of the United States to deport illegal criminals from this country, then hoping that they gain power back, and then they'll do the same thing they're doing before, just not enforce our laws.
I hear. And we need to stop this. But
Right, so
people need to, I always say, like you said, Trump is the most transparent president, not governor, president we've had in U.S. history in a while, at least. But I always say hold everyone accountable. That's one of the models of the digital free press. And my other motto, I don't know how I have two mottos, but two mottos is hold everyone accountable and transparency is key. So, but we need to bring awareness. People think that the judges You explained very well what the judges are doing that's wrong. But people need to be aware what the judges are doing. And the media is playing it like the judges are right. Because the media is the left wing arm, to put it mild. And I we need to build up independent journalism. Podcast hosts like you, me, and tons of others are doing great jobs. But we need more awareness.
This really is a battle, I think. I talk about this show quite a bit, where this isn't really a battle of laws and executive orders, while it is, ultimately what Trump's term is mostly about is winning over hearts and minds. Because at the end of the day, there's going to come, if they keep writing these injunctions, there's going to come a point where Trump's going to say enough is enough. And so at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, well, who do people believe is right? Because whoever people believe is right, that's at the end of the day is going to win this argument. So I'll give a quick parable for your listeners, and then we can talk about how this relates to Donald Trump. All right, so you're let's say in this case you're modern times, right? You're the voter, and you're going to pick who you're going to listen to. Okay, so you have a president who says, this, I am your president. You are going to do this, and then you have a judge says, no, I'm a judge. This is what you're going to do. And then let's say you have a pastor, and the pastor says, no, I am ordained by God. You are going to do this because God commands it. So in that parable, who has the power?
God.
Okay. All right. So the answer is ultimately whoever, you're right in that God is the ultimate authority of all things. Yes, that is true. But in this parable, what I'm trying to get to is whoever the person chooses to listen to is the one that's going to have the ultimate authority. The other two are going to go away.
True.
And so this is what this ultimately is a fight for hearts and minds. I think this is why Donald Trump is being so smart to one kind of quietly go about this and not take the bait and give the left all their talking points and screaming, because they're going to do that anyways. But he's exposing them for the liars and hypocrites they are. And even in their own fake polls, they are down in the 20%. That's how unpopular the Democrats are right now. And so this is the fight that Donald Trump is ultimately fighting and winning, is that he has to show people how corrupt the Democrats are, how corrupt these judges are, and how corrupt this deep state uniparty is in our federal government. Because once people, the normies realize just how insane all this is, then when Trump decides to openly defy these judges or say, you know what, go pound sand, I'm going to deport these guys whether you like it or not. You can write an injunction, but stop me. If the people are with Donald Trump, then that is going to work. But if people think that he is violating the Constitution, right, then they will rise up against him. And so this is ultimately a battle for hearts and minds, in my opinion.
You're 100% right. And that's where the awareness brings in. People need to learn how to think for themselves and learn that the Constitution is the way of the land. People in this day and age don't know how to learn for them, think for themselves. I have a stance, not a model, a stance that I don't endorse. People know where I stand, and especially with the new style of podcast coming, definitely you're gonna know where I stand. But I don't endorse. Inform and not manipulate is the way I do it. Because when I tell people where to go, that the Constitution is the way of the land, which is it, I'm shaping people's minds. And that's fine. But when I tell people who to vote for or what to do, that's manipulation. And that's not my job. I have no right telling, I have every right. I have no problem telling them that the Constitution is the way of the land, because that they should know.
Yeah, I'm with you. Politicians are something that's real kind of blessing and curse, especially on our side. We have so many that pretend to be Republicans, but really what we call rhinos or shiny shoe Republicans, they're really Democrats. They're essentially Republicans in name only. And that is something we see on our side, and people get burned often because they'll love and they'll say all the right things in front of the camera. They go, okay, yeah, this is my guy. I endorse this guy. And then they go into Washington and they do everything the Democrats want to do. And now you put yourself in a real pickle.
That's exactly where we are right now. We live in a very trying time, and if people learn how to think for themselves, we'd be better.
Right. And,
And I think
that's, I think, the real heart of a lot of the independent creators like us and all the podcasts and all the rise of everybody that is really changing how they get information. Because you can go just a few years ago, but even back a generation, you come home from work, you turn on fake news, and you'd watch it, and you'd have no idea because they were all talking the same talking points that anything else was going on. But then, as we discovered, it's much, much worse than that, as they were not only picking and choosing which stories to tell you, but they were leaving out crucial details to get you to come to conclusions that you never would have came to if you had known the whole story. And this is something that I think is far more evil than telling like a blatant lie, where you can just say, hey, no, look, they lied. Here's the point. But when they're leaving out key details that would have changed your outcome, that is something that's far, far worse. One of the great examples back in the recent election cycle was the 9 bullets hoax. So this was where Donald Trump was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about the war pigs in Washington, D.C., how they would send, your sons, your daughters out to die, but they would stay home safe in D.C., right? So they get rich off your children's blood. That's what he was talking about. But in that conversation, he brought up Liz Cheney specifically because she was going in campaigning with Kamala Harris. So he goes in and he's talking about the 9 bullets hoax, and he's talking about that frame of reference. He's saying, Liz Cheney, she sits safely in D.C. She doesn't go out in the field, and she doesn't have bullets flying at her head. Now, if you had that context, you would know what he was talking about. But what did they do instead? They cut that part out. They put in the first sentence, skip the middle, and put on the last sentence. So if all you heard is that Donald Trump said that he wanted Liz Cheney to be shot, which is not at all what he said. And the fake news networks, they all knew they were lying, and they all ran with it. And it was only thankful to people like us and X and Rumble and podcasts, we were able to play the clips that they showed, and they were able to play the entire clip, and we're really able to expose just how blatantly they're lying. Because if you'd had the middle, no one would come to the conclusion that they want you to come to. And all of a sudden, it makes sense. And this is, I think, part of what we talked about earlier, the winning for the hearts and minds, is this is also part of it. And I think why fake news is dying and independent creators are growing at such a rapid pace is because people in general are independent thinkers. I mean, most people are in the middle somewhere. They're middle right, the middle left. There's some things that they agree with on the Democrats. There's some things they agree with on the Republicans. They're not really one side or the other. But they've been manipulated to the point by fake news that they only get the left side's talking points. And there's a yearning to they know they're lying, but they had no way to go somewhere else to find information. And now they do. And that, I think, has really changed the entire structure of how people gain information. If without independence, without independent creators, without actual free speech, without Rumble, X, and podcasts, I don't think Donald Trump is president right now, especially with everything that X did. I think Kamala Harris is president without that.
Yes, and that's why with this news manipulation, that's why I do my news roundup. I'm not trying to promote. My followers know exactly what I do, and that's why I do my news roundup, because I try to cut through the bias, and I try to cut through fake news. And the problem is even on the right, when people put out things that AOC got tickets. Who doesn't get a ticket? Just because AOC is AOC doesn't mean that it's news that she got a ticket. I don't care. She's a human being. And like, oh, you want to infiltrate the news to cut out other news? It drives me mad. So I do the TDFP news roundup every day. I try to do it every day, and I credit the actual reporters and I credit the actual sites, and I say this is the thing. Now, hold me accountable. If the story's fake, hold me accountable. Like I said, hold everyone accountable. I'm not infallible. But as Dan Bongino said before he became FBI agent, FBI deputy director, he said the media is not telling you the story; they're telling you a story, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that, which is why they're losing so much influence and why Donald Trump is president. It really came to head in the Joe Biden debate where they were lying for him for years, calling it a stutter or calling it cheap fakes when everybody could see what was happening. And if we had an honest, independent media, then they would have showed you the full story and showed you all the clips that were only coming out on X, were only coming out on independent creators. The fake news networks refused to show any of them because that went against their narrative. And now that we were able to show all this stuff, I think that was the point when Donald Trump, Biden was talking about the border, and then he finished mumbling behind me, and so we did the border, and then I did it. And Donald Trump, he sits there and goes, I don't know what he said. I don't think he knows what he said. And Biden turned with like the glass deer in the headlights look in his face, just completely gone. And that was the moment I believe that the normies realized how much fake news was lying to them. Because people like me and you, where we follow this stuff, I was watching the debate and I'm thinking, this isn't even that bad. I can pull up 20 clips on my computer right now that are way worse than what you're seeing in the debate. But that was the moment on the audience that saw just how much the mainstream media was lying. And then this ridiculous notion from Tapper that somehow he's going to throw it back on the White House, it's just doubling down on stupid, in my opinion. And I say, please keep it up. And go ahead.
Once we're talking about Tapper, he needs to be called out for grifting, because this is one of the biggest grifts and malfeasance I have seen in media in a long time. And it's saying a lot, because like we just spoke about the media changes the narrative, leaves things out, and everything. But this is taking it to a whole new level, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the notion that there's no good win for the fake news out of this, even with Tapper were to win. So let's talk about essentially what he's trying to say is that the White House lied to the mainstream media, and so they believe that he just had a stutter or that these were cheap fakes, right? So it was all the Biden administration. They're not even blaming the Democrats. They're just blaming the Biden administration because they're still all in the bag for the Democrats. But they are in their own self-interest is that they can't admit to the audience that they were lying this entire time. There is a clip with Megyn Kelly where she pulled up one from 2020 where Lord Trump was saying, hey, look, Biden's gone, right? He's not there. This isn't a stutter. There's some kind of mental decline. And Jake Tapper immediately blew up on her. No, it's a stutter. And then he started, of course, what they always love to do is go to children. There's children out there and they have a stutter. And think about how the children feel when you're making fun of a stutter. I'm not making fun of a stutter. Yeah, this man's mentally ill. But of course they did that. And then he said, yeah, I'm sure you're really concerned for Biden's well-being, right? This being Tapper. And just cut her off, mocked her, and insulted her, and then kicked her off her show when she was right the entire time. And the part that Tapper, I believe, is trying to hide from you is even back then, Tapper knew that Biden was in a mental decline, and him and the rest of the fake news covered it up until they couldn't anymore during the debate. And now they're in a no-win situation because either one, the White House was lying to them and they were duped. Okay, so these are supposed to be journalists, right? They're supposed to have a First Amendment right. So you're telling that all of us knew this was happening and was showing all these clips, but the people on fake news, the ones that are making millions and millions of dollars in their high, lofty ivory towers, couldn't put this together? That's either so unbelievable, because that's essentially what he's trying to sell you is the White House lied to fake news and it was White House fault. Or the other side, which is just as bad, is they knew and they were lying. But Tapper's book doesn't do them the favors that he thinks it's going to do. That's how arrogant the left is. The left thinks, oh yeah, I'll just put out a book that says the White House is lying to us. And so because the White House is lying to us, then we're absolved of everything that happened over the last 4 years. please continue to die off fake news. Please continue to do this. I beg you.
Tapper needs to come out and publicly apologize. He will never,
No.
and he will be one of the causes of the mainstream media's demise. But if he wants to do what's right, he will come out and apologize.
They have no intention of doing what's right. Zero. Nothing has changed with the mainstream media. If they were going to change, they would have changed when Donald Trump won office back, right? Because all the lies that they threw all throughout that time, the boxes, the convictions, the Gene Carroll, all the impeachment hoaxes, the suckers and losers, the 9 bullets, all that stuff failed because people don't believe them anymore. You go back just a decade and Donald Trump's not president because enough people believe the mainstream media that they would have just trusted they were telling the truth. But I think what's really coming down to the theme of this interview is winning over hearts and minds, because the news has no longer done that. And now that we have done that, they can no longer manipulate people, and it's been exposed. And rather than taking accountability and stepping back, go, maybe, I don't know, maybe we should, let me think about this. Maybe we should stop lying to people. If we want people to trust us, maybe we on fake news should stop lying. And then they'd all laugh, and they'd all drink whatever fancy crap they're drinking and eat their filet mignons, and then go right back to thinking, no, because they're not news. Okay, fake news is not news at all. What they are propagandists for the Democrat Party. They don't think it's their job to report the news like you do and you do on your show. They think it's their job to manipulate people into believing whatever it is that they're trying to get them to believe.
Like I said, hold everyone accountable. Cash, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have anything you wanted to say to the audience before we end off the show?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate spending this time for you and allowing me to come on and show the audience. I hope they found it entertaining. So my name is Cash Loren. I do a live show Monday through Friday. We just moved to 8 p.m. Eastern. It's a 1-hour show, and we cover politics in the mainstream media. So I hope you join us. The best place is on X, and you can find me all over social media at the Cash Loren Show.
Check him out. He's a great guy, and hopefully maybe he will come on again.
I'd love to.
Till then, make sure to check out Cash's show. Hold everyone accountable, and I can't wait to announce the new format of the show. See ya around.